Hi, it's State Representative Jim Walsh here for our weekly update. We're past the halfway point of the current legislative session here in Olympia, and issues really are starting to clarify. The lines of debate, the lines in policy, the lines in budgets. We've talked a lot about some of the gun issues we've dealt with. I'd like to move on to two other issues for this week's update. One is funding special ed, K-12 special education in our public schools around the state. Recently, we had a pretty spirited debate on the floor of the House here in Olympia over House Bill 1436, which was a bill intended to increase the funding available for special ed programs for special education kids around the state. It was controversial. The bill went through a lot of iterations and variations, and the version that got to the House floor increased some of the money for special ed, but didn't fully fund the requests of special education teachers and programs around the state. I had committed to the special ed teachers in my district that I was going to support fully funding special ed. Now, this gets into some of the weeds on budget definitions of what fully funding is, but the difference between the proposal and what we agree fully funding in this context means was significant. Fully funding, to simplify slightly, was worth about $1 billion in budget allocation. The bill only put about a third of that, and just barely a third, into the programs. What we, on the conservative side, did was we proposed an amendment that brought that number closer up to the fully funding amount. And the debate that ensued was somewhat a reverse of usual, with the conservatives arguing for spending more money and the progressives arguing for spending less. In the end, the progressives prevailed. They have more votes in the legislature, and we ended up spending less money on special ed than we'd originally intended. Now, this is additional money, but it's not as much as I had committed to my teachers to support. So I ended up voting no on the bill, even though it did increase by some the amount of money we're spending on special ed. That bill now goes over to the state Senate. I'm hoping they will increase the amount of money going to special ed, and if they do, I may be more inclined to support the bill when it comes back for a concurrence vote in the House. Separately, we've been debating housing a lot in Olympia. There were a number of bills that try to encourage more housing development, a goal I agree with generally, but some of these bills that are meant to encourage more housing development, well, they don't always do what they're meant to do, and they don't encourage new housing development as much as they should. The debate ended up really focusing on three bills, one of which allows property owners to split their lots more easily, with the idea that by splitting their lots, they could build new housing on existing property, real estate, more easily. Another had to do with making it easier and faster to develop accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Those are the mother-in-law suites or grandma suites that are sometimes standalone apartments in a backyard or a side yard or an apartment above a garage, those kinds of things. The ADU bill would make it easier to get those kinds of housing units built. And finally, there was a larger and more controversial middle housing bill that tries to encourage development of duplexes, triplexes, and quads, fourplex units, instead of single-family housing around the state. I ended up voting yes on the first two bills, on the lot splitting bill and on the ADU bill. The lot splitting bill I thought was narrow enough. It only allows you to split a lot one time and only into two parts, that I thought it was appropriate policy to encourage development. The ADU bill I thought was clearly stated enough that it will encourage building some of those standalone small residential units on existing properties. I voted no. I couldn't get to a yes vote on the middle housing bill. I thought that by demanding that duplexes and triplexes and quads be built where currently single-family homes are built, took too much of the local decision-making away from city councils and county commissions who normally handle zoning on property and issues of housing density. I think that the state should be involved in encouraging development. I don't like it when the state tells local city councils what they have to do with their zoning. I think those decisions, that stuff, should be decisions made by city councils, locally elected government, that's more directly answerable to local people. So those are some of the other issues, other than guns and taxes, that we're dealing with in Olympia. And we will continue to deal with all of these issues as we go ahead with about 6 or 7 weeks left in the current legislative session. That's it for this week. I'll talk to you again soon, and in the meantime, have a great week.